Happy Father's Day, Ollie.
Oh man, you know what? Right back at you. And you are a great dad. We're probably the greatest in the room.
Thank you for saying that. I know you're contractually obligated to, but it still means a lot coming from you nonetheless. So thank you.
I think that contract still the ink hasn't dried yet, so all it takes is a little spring shower and deal's void.
Yeah. Well, it's Father's Day. Fathers everywhere across America are celebrating on the golf course, or at brunch, or perhaps at your favorite paintball location, or park, or where I don't know. Where do people do Father's Day?
Paintball. God, that sounds like aggro work bonding. I think that's a real interesting thing. What is the ideal Father's Day activity? That's kind of I think what that is says a lot about the dad, you know.
Yeah, that's right. What's your favorite Father's Day of your? Would any memories that you're
Well,
willing
it's
to share?
literally when you brought up all these scenarios and I was like, not really, none of them are really doing it for me. I mean, parks for certainly one. I do remember there's a picture. I'll have to dig this up, but my son, I want to say we were still in LA at the time, so he was three max. But we went to a brewery because we all know in this current era that breweries are bars that allow children. Like the craft beer movement smartly recognized that beer is not does not bring the intensity and certainty of hard liquor. It doesn't bring the kind of stuffiness of wine. And it is you come and have a beer or two at the brewery during the day, and you should make it family friendly. So my father's in memory, it's really just the picture is it's me at the brewery, and I have like a tater tot, I think, in my mouth. And my son is giving me this big, huge hug. He's wearing a cape, and maybe I think I was wearing a crown. I will find the picture and send it to you. But these were you know, and It's funny because now my son is like 13 and it's been a little standoffish with me lately. But just like that massive affection. And he's an affectionate kid even now. But he just gave me this big old hug, and you're like, yeah, you're still quite, I was like a god amongst men era with my son. So yeah, that's the one that pops up into mind. But I don't know. I tend to try and not make too big of a deal out of any of these things, like birthday or Father's Day. My wife always takes care of it, and she always makes it special. She's always giving me presents and cards and timely. Like I wake up and it's all there. Like I'm on Mother's Day. I'm literally like, it's like 3 p.m. on Mother's Day, and I'm like, I gotta get to the, I'm yeah. She really hooks that up. So I don't know. Yeah. What about you?
Oh boy. Yeah, no, we will have a brunch of some sort. I'm not on the golf course. I've never swung a club. Um, I think we're gonna go to Governor's Island this Father's Day, as we've done years past, which is a great place to ride bikes and just chill out in a hammock. It was a former military base, a little island off of New York that you can get to by ferry.
I
So fun to
when you brought up its original intention, suddenly like the idea of you just biking and then needing to lie in a hammock just disappeared, and then I just pictured soldiers scared that they were about to face death.
Yeah. I
So
don't know if any battles were waged there. I think it was more of a,
training
home
ground.
base. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Who knows?
That's you gotta. There's somewhere you gotta lay your head when you're thinking about, wow, I could be dead in 3 months. So, Governor's Island.
What? a positive way to launch into this Father's Day episode, Ollie.
You put it in my head. You put these thoughts in my head.
It's what
In
I
my
do
head.
best. Well,
Yeah.
here, listen, you mentioned your wife always hooking it up, always taking
Yeah.
care of things. And
Right.
Father's Day would be nothing without Mother's Day. Quite literally, I want to give a little bit of history here for those
Yeah.
of us who are not familiar, which is probably all of us. So,
Yeah.
how did Father's Day even come to be? We know it, we accept it, we take it for granted. Well, Mother's Day came first, as it should, or as it did. It's just a historical truth. Mother's Day came first. It actually started in 1908, was established by a woman named Anna Jarvis. She celebrated Mother's Day through the church, of course, through a service of worship at St. Andrew's Methodist Church in West Virginia. It was May 10th, 1908. So that's why it's always happening around sometime in May. And then eventually got picked up nationally. Didn't take too long. Anna Jarvis founded Mother's Day in 1908, became a national holiday in 1914. But, as we do, as we're wont to do, men, fathers were like, hey, what about us? Hey, what are we, chopped liver? So
Well, well,
in
well.
1909, only a year later, they were like, hey, we're going to have a day too.
Hmm.
And Sonora Smart Dodd from Spokane, Washington, decided to create Father's Day, inspired by her own father. Perhaps you remember him, William Jackson Smart. Great name. He was
Yeah.
a Civil War vet. He
Hmm.
raised 6 kids on his
Hmm.
own, a widower twice,
Hmm.
and one of his daughters, Sonora, thought, "Hey, my dad, William Jackson Smart, deserves a day," so created Father's Day.
Oh, that's
The
nice.
first Father's Day was celebrated in 1910, in June. Why Father's Day is always in June, in Washington State. But here's the thing
Hmm.
Father's Day, you know how like the first Mother's Day was 1908 and then it became a national holiday in 1914? Not
Yes.
so. Father's Day didn't become a national holiday until 1972. All right? President Nixon signed it into law as a national holiday.
So it's really Nixon's day. I'm going to be
Yeah.
thinking about.
Don't say he never did anything for you, dads. Nixon got Father's Day the national recognition it deserved.
He normalized trade with China, but that's all over now.
He did a lot of things at that
Yeah.
hotel. That's right. But anyway, so it's Father's Day. It's Father's Day. Thank you
Yeah.
to, big shout out to, who did we say? Anna Jarvis,
Yeah.
Sonora. Big shout out to William Jackson Smart, and of course, Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick, for giving us this holiday that we are celebrating today on golf courses all across the nation. Not me, of course, as you know, I'll be on Governor's Island. You, of course,
Preparing
are
for war.
currently in Asia. We're in some sort of weird continuity time loop.
Yeah.
Uh, but we're having a
Oh,
good time.
man. Yeah, I'll be in Japan celebrating Father's Day, which, yeah, I mean, score. You know what? New greatest Father's Day ever is 2025. Yeah. Heck yeah. I think it's interesting that for Mother's Day and Father's Day, it took two women to recognize that we should recognize the people who raised us. You know? Like, that's crazy.
Once
That's,
again, the emotional labor defaulting to
yeah.
the other sex.
It's interesting too because I would think, based on no knowledge, just me shooting from the hip and just kind of guessing, because that's how I'm a dad and everything else I've done in my life. You'd think like, oh, the men get everything first, right? We get to do this or that. Like, I don't know. I was thinking voting because women, the suffrage movement came way later. But it's interesting that Mother's Day started first. Mother's Day was first. Then
Mother's
Father's
Day
Day later.
came before women had the right to vote.
Weird. Wow, well, does it surprise you? No,
No,
it
no.
doesn't. It
But
doesn't.
anyway, happy Father's Day. We're here. to talk about dads. Even though Father's Day wasn't nationally recognized until 1972, dads have been dadding for, thousands of years.
Before the 70s. Well before the 70s.
Well before. It's estimated that of all the people who lived on Earth, there have been about 42 billion fathers. That's a lot of dads.
Did you make that number up?
No, I Googled it.
Seriously?
Yeah, what do you think? I do a little research for this show.
That's true. 42 billion seems like a random number.
It's an estimate. It's an estimate based on all human population and percentage who have been fathers. And, it's probably not exact, but yeah, we're around 42 billion. But here's the thing. We don't have the time to talk about all 42 billion dads.
No.
And fatherhood, dadhood, it's expansive. But this is called World's Greatest Dad. And we want to talk about what it means to be a dad on this Father's Day, and what it means to be a good dad, where maybe some dads fell short, and just kind of have a conversation about it. So I thought what we could do is we could just talk about a few different dads in different eras. We're going to go through the classical era, okay? We're going to go through a few dads from the medieval era. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. Whoa.
The early modern era. And then it'll bring us all the way to today. What we know as modern day, modern fatherhood. What does it mean to be a modern dad? So we're going to give representation to dads throughout the pantheon of history. How does that sound, Ollie?
Yeah, it sounds like we're talking about, I don't know, painters or classical musicians, but I don't care. I mean, I'm kind of curious to know how Genghis Khan did it.
Let's talk about it. Let's get into it. First up, classical era. Now remember, we couldn't cover all the dads, so we're just trying to pick out a few dads from the era. Seminal dads, if you will. Now that might be a little bit offensive term, seminal, but this is a fatherhood podcast, and it is Father's Day, so we're going to go with it, all right? Here we go. First up, this guy in contention for world's greatest dad from the classical era. Oh, I should tell you, let's pick one. We'll pick one who's the world's greatest dad of the era, okay? Once we go through them all. All right, so we're going to talk, we're going to debate, pros, cons, not Ollie cons, but, negatives. That would be a good podcast spinoff. Pros and cons.
Yeah. Maybe it's a segment. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right. Classical era, world's greatest dads. First up, Abraham. Okay? Circa 2000 BCE. Yeah. Who was Abraham, you ask? Well, my friend, Abraham is from the Bible. He was, many consider him the father of 3 religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
He's a big guy. Isn't he in the Torah too? Or the Old Testament?
That's
Is
right.
the Torah the Old Testament?
Yeah, that's right.
Got it. See?
Original book, yeah, OG, the prequel. So Abraham, he's in there. He was the guy who said, there's one God. And so he kind of set the foundation. But also, a lot of people don't know this, a father, perhaps his most important role. He was a dad. He was just a dad.
Yeah.
Abraham had some sons. Famously brought his son Isaac to the top of a mountain, and he was ready to murder him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what happened, Ollie? Do you know what happened? What did Abraham do?
I think the bush set fire.
Different guy. Right? That's Moses.
Okay. Oh, I know what happened. And when I'm going to shock you with my intelligence, and it's all because of TV. Yeah, he was about to just, take him out. It was over, and then God's like, whoa, 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 chill. Here's a lamb. And the best part is, after you take this lamb out, you get to eat it. Good for you for almost killing your kid.
This is Biblical Cheap Eats with Ollie Khan.
This was unbelievable. I was so close to beheading my child. And now I get to eat lamb with my child.
This is the best thing I ever ate. Classical edition. The best lamb I ever ate So there's up on this mountain, and you
Yeah.
bring your kid up to sacrifice because, of course, God wants you to slay your firstborn son. But then he goes, "No, don't do it."
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a pretty, he was a pretty influential dad,
Yeah.
not a modern dad, a classical era dad,
Yeah.
Abraham,
Yeah.
ready to sacrifice his son. Now, do you think that's a sign of a father who, because some could say that's a good dad, is he's teaching values. He's like, look,
Hmm.
it's important. This is a value set that I have, that I will do whatever God says. On the other hand, when it comes at the expense of your child's actual human existence, their life, because you're murdering them,
Hmm.
does that make you a bad dad? I don't know. These are the tough questions, Ollie.
I've got the whole thing down, but first I just want to clarify this. I know exactly what happened, and it's not because I attended any kind of religious school or learned it from, a proper ancient scripture. I watched so much television, Neil, and my dad was too cheap to pay for cable that I was forced to watch every channel on the VHF, UHF, everything, including the local Christian channel. And there was a cartoon on it that was called Superbook that was about some kids who are on a computer, and then this Bible falls on the computer and they're transported to biblical times. So basically, it was just animated biblical stories, Old and New Testament. They had a little robot named Gizmo that had a cross on it, like a crusader type cross, and they would just travail around biblical times. And I was like, I guess I'll watch this. And so I watched a cartoon of all this stuff. So that's how I know things. Desperate to watch any kind of TV when I didn't have access to cable. Look, I think there's something really deep here. And this is the truth. And this is how I kind of understand my dad and how I was raised, and then how I raised my kid, is that everything we have is from what our parents, basically did to us. And I don't mean teach us or raise us, but everything they did. And that includes the mistakes and the successes, right? So we're all a product of that OG dad who was like, I'm gonna have to kill my kid because God said so. Because that happened, right? And the kid survived. We're able to survive, and ultimately, look, we can learn from previous dads' decisions and improve on it. And that's how I look at my dad, like how maybe he supported me or didn't support me as well as he could have, and then how I approach my son. So there you go, there you have it. There's my take, is that
Yeah.
there's lessons to be learned, lessons to be learned. There's going to be a lamb. No reason to drag your kid up to the mountain.
Yeah. The next generation might say, hey, God, this seems a little crazy.
Yeah. I was like, I know
The
you're
rest
bluffing,
of the narrative.
God. Come on.
Come on.
Can we just give me the lamb? Give me the lamb.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go a little bit later. We'll take it into the future a little bit, all the way to 551 before the Common Era. There's this guy Confucius
Mm.
who was a
Sure.
dad.
I didn't know that.
Perhaps you've heard of Confucius from a fortune cookie or a history book, but Confucius was a Chinese philosopher whose
Yeah.
teachings shaped East Asian ethics and society. Pretty
Mm.
important guy. Not
Yeah.
his most important role. He was a dad. Now, Ollie, little is known about his children because who cares, right? Like history was like, whatever, like we want to know about your teachings. But the truth is, he mentored all his students with this kind of paternal care. A lot of people say that Confucius created the foundational ideal of what we now know is this kind of symbol for the wise, morally upright, disciplinarian father.
Mm-hmm.
Confucius kind of created that roadmap. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Confucius as a dad. You
Yeah.
know, Was he good dad? Was he bad dad?
Yeah.
Um, the truth is he gave the world kind of a blueprint for what is fatherhood, in terms of as a philosopher. But also he kind of ignored his own kids while he was out mentoring students, focusing on his career. So I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you think? Was Confucius a good dad or a bad dad?
Again, a lot of things to unpack there, and I think, maybe this is a lesson for all of us sometimes when we think about, I think Bobby talked about this too, but it's like, you feel like there's this duty, right, as a dad to be like, oh, you need to have this career, and, like it's, you have to be really, really, successful, and then I think too, again, this is something I've appreciated years later, humbly, perhaps, I don't know, but there are a lot of things I am should be proud and successful for, and that's just the simple things, that you can do, showing up for your kid and stuff like that. So maybe the lesson here isn't about, creating a body of philosophical work that would shape a continent and even other philosophers and general mankind for centuries, for thousands of years. Maybe it is about going, all right, I'll take you out for ice cream after school, or, oh, shoot, you left your water bottle. Let me go back home and get it. Maybe, there are successes in the small things. That sounds pretty Confucius if you ask me. I think I nailed it.
Love it.
Did I nail that take? This is like, I feel like I'm doing cheap eats again. I was like, this was amazing, and I still have $3.72 left.
That's all we have left to our name. Here's the third nominee for the classical era. A guy by the name of Marcus Aurelius. A lot of people knew him as the Roman emperor,
Yeah,
Stoic philosopher.
yeah.
Okay, wrote this famous treatise called Meditations. For who? Who did he write it for? His son. At the end of the day, Marcus Aurelius was just a dad, just like us, trying to provide some guidance for the future. He promoted calm, ethical leadership. He was all about mentorship. He was trying to be a great dad. And look, there's a case to be made that Marcus Aurelius was a pretty good dad, right? Like he left a personal legacy of wisdom, about how to overcome tough things, and really just was concerned about the future for his kids and all the children of Rome. There's also a case to be made that maybe he didn't do a great job. His son Commodus ended up becoming a tyrannical emperor. So perhaps the lessons fell on deaf ears. Is that Marcus's fault?
You know, look, I have watched Gladiator too many times with my son most recently, where you got to call a spade a spade. And Marcus Aurelius, I mean, and I don't know if Joaquin Phoenix, frankly, I've always been critical of his performance. I have never been a big fan of it. I think he got an Oscar nom. I was like, get out of here. And maybe that just rubs me the wrong way. The Joaquin Phoenix performance and maybe Joaquin Phoenix in general. Yeah, I'm throwing a lot of shade here. But yeah, not a big fan of Marcus Aurelius. That could be perhaps mistakenly influenced, misinfluenced by Ridley Scott. But it is what it is. I can't separate the two. I can't separate the film Gladiator from 2000 and whatever happened way back in Rome. But yeah, I mean, if your son grows up to be a tyrant, that's established. Maybe Joaquin Phoenix wasn't too far off in his performance. Either way, I'm gonna toss the big X. Not a big fan. I yeah, I would say if my son grew up to be Commodus and he had to frickin' cheat when he fights Russell Crowe and he still gets killed, I would be ashamed. So, sorry, Marcus. Not a fan. Not a fan of that. We all make mistakes, but just I can't support it. Can't support it, despite the
Seems like
work.
I know which way you're leaning, but I'm gonna throw the final decision because we're gonna close out the classical era. So, who is the world's greatest dad of the classical era? Is it Abraham, founder of the three religions,
Yeah.
Confucius, philosopher extraordinaire, or Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher?
I'm gonna go with Confucius. I mean, look, I know he worked a lot, but in the end of the day, like the whole knife to the kid thing, like I tried to look at it as a glass half full with Abraham, but it's harsh times over there. Look, you don't know what it's like. You have to be in another man's sandals, to know what that's like. I'm gonna go with Confucius. No stories of knife to son, and definitely, in fact, I really don't know. I didn't even know he was a dad. Maybe that's a great dad. Someone who's just like, you know what, I do my thing, and then I go home to the fam, and we keep the fam kind of chill. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Confucius.
Okay, Confucius, congratulations.
Yeah,
You're the world's greatest dad. Happy Father's Day, Confucius.
yeah, of the classical era.
Of classical era, of course, of course. Alrighty. Well, moving on
Mm-hmm.
to the medieval era. Let's get a little medieval, Ollie. What do you say?
Oh yeah, I love it. Big fan of Pulp Fiction.
So, first up, we've got Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne, best known for being the king of the Franks and the
Mm,
first Holy Roman Emperor.
mm-hmm.
As a dad in the medieval era, he was kind of like the Nick Cannon of his day. He had over 18 children.
Nick.
But get this,
Wow. Yeah.
they say he was actively involved in their education while he was governing, So he was kind of like the look, I'm not going to let my job get the best of me. I'm going to be an involved dad. Uh, Charlemagne set the model for elite fathers to value literacy and legacy. It wasn't all just about the here and now. It was like, what's this mean for our family generations from now? Charlemagne was really kind of concerned with the family name. He encouraged his daughters to be literate and protected their inheritance rights, which was like, you know, who would have ever thought, in the 8th century that was even
Mm-hmm.
possible. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's some dads today who don't even, want their daughters to read.
Oh yeah.
Just across my neighborhood in Brooklyn, some of the Hasids, they're like, no reading. Anyways,
Wait, really? That's a
oh
thing?
yeah, yeah, it's really sad. Yeah.
Crazy.
Anyways, but that was Charlemagne. Now, at the same time, he was a little bit controlling about who his daughters could marry. So he was like, you can read. I'm going to make sure you get some of my fortune, but I'm going to pick your husband. Of course, husband, because it's, again, 8th century. So that's Charlemagne. I mean, what are your thoughts on Charlemagne as a dad in the medieval era?
I mean, sometimes we are just simply people of our times. He was a man of his time. In some ways, it seems like he was ahead, so you have to give him some kudos and some points there. And I think too, like, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like we talked about this with like, oh my God, my parents didn't make us wear seatbelts. We just rolled around in the back of the station wagon. Isn't that insane? Because we were such like car seat, car seat, car seat. We are the parents of absolute maniacal car seat culture, and I think that's just because we go with the times. So I think much like Ollie Khan and Neil always saddled with the car seat. Very happy to find out that the stroller could detach into the car seat. He had one of those little jobbies. Charlemagne was, a person of his times, but he, was probably someone who kind of pushed things. He pushed the envelope, saw justice, and did what he could. So I think that's pretty good. Pretty good. I like the old Charlemagne. Most of the time you were talking though, I pictured Charlemagne the rapper. So maybe that's what's messing me up.
Yeah, he kind of took the name back.
He really did. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to another medieval dad. Next up is Prophet Muhammad. He was
Go on. Okay, here we go. Wow.
he was a dad.
Yeah.
The world's greatest dad in history. Come on. He was a father.
You're right.
He wasn't just the father of Islam. Prophet Muhammad, best known as the founder of Islam,
Yeah.
also was a dad. He was a girl dad. He had four daughters and two sons. They didn't survive. Um,
Mm.
Now, the daughter that they speak of most in the history books is Fatima. He had a deep love and adoration for his daughter, Fatima. Now, he really influenced fatherhood. He was, he's known for reforming some maybe harsh pre-Islamic parenting norms, especially toward daughters. This is probably because he had four daughters. He was the Kobe Bryant uh,
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Told that.
medieval
Huh.
dadhood. Maybe I don't know about his 3-point shot, but he was like, I want to empower my daughters,
Hmm.
and he did. He publicly showed love and respect for his daughters. He certainly challenged toxic masculinity the best he could in the medieval era. Really, the only case for maybe being not such a great dad is all his male sons died in infancy, which, I don't know. Do you blame him? Did he have something to do with it?
Wow. So that's it? Well, I guess there's not really. To be honest, I assume they maybe have died in war or something like that because
Hmm.
these are the times where if you're a man, you end up going and fighting and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, that's all speculative. You know what I mean in terms of like how all his sons passed away. But like, so do you know what were the pre norms for women? I guess I suppose assume in the Arab world before we don't know. Or
I'm going to assume not great. Not great.
okay, okay, so it got better. It seems that there was some okay, all right. I mean, it may have been just like pirate level, you know, like basically like yeah, like I imagine it was not pretty. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man of the
That's
times.
uh that's Muhammad for you.
Okay.
Let's move on to our
Okay.
third medieval dad nominee, and that's King Alfred the Great.
Okay.
King
I
Alfred
mean,
the Great, he was an Anglo-Saxon king. He
hmm
defended England against the Vikings.
hmm
But as a dad, again, the most important job, uh, you know, he was just dad. He personally translated Latin books into Old English for his kids, and he was just, probably made pancakes for him too. I'm just going to throw that out there. He advocated for education as a fatherly duty, and he valued intellect over bloodline alone, and he was a model of educational leadership. That said, King Alfred the Great in the ninth century, uh, you know, couldn't get past maybe some of his inherent biases. He also arranged strategic political marriages for his daughters. It was just like, oh, you got to marry this guy because it would be really good for me, and that, frankly, just feels a little selfish, Ali, to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's like I said, there's progress and then there's flipping the script. It's hard to just push for the latter. You know what I mean? All right, so those are our three, huh?
Yeah. So of the three dads in the medieval era that we discussed, Charlemagne, Prophet Muhammad, and King Alfred the Great. Who's the world's greatest dad for the medieval era?
I have to say I enjoy all three of these options because there's something to be said about the mentality of a father who is, frankly, in a world that's usually dominated by men, to think about their daughters and go, why don't they have a bigger piece of the pie? What's up with that? So I like all of that. Um, I mean, truly, obviously going back a long time, it's hard to get as much concrete information as possible. I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine it was always tough for women around the world back then. I would say specifically so for the region that Muhammad was from. But Charlemagne, I just got a lot of wonderful concrete details, literacy and inheritance. I think, those are just like, those are like kind of like, it's almost like the Obamacare. Like you can walk away and go, well, look, this is what it is. It's been codified into a law. It's connected to that. So, I think anybody can say, in eras like, we see the world and we go, is it just? Is it fair? I think all three, to a degree, did that in regard to their daughters, but I think Charlemagne gave us that Obamacare, gave us the New Deal, gave daughters the New Deal of the era. So I'm going with Charlemagne.
Okay, Charlemagne, congratulations.
Yeah.
You're medieval era's world's greatest dad.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day, Charlemagne.
Yeah. Good stuff. Great
Let's
stuff.
kick things up a notch, huh? Let's move to the early modern era.
Oh, God, I'm a little worried. We really had some hot takes. I can only imagine.
We're
A lot
starting
of
the
dads. Yeah.
What? Yeah, a lot of dads. I mean, 42 billion. Come on, dads,
Yeah.
kept dadding. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, of every profession,
That's
of
right.
every profession, religious leader, general.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. Those are the options.
Yeah.
But also, this guy, you may know him as a writer in the early modern era, 16th century, guy by the name of William Shakespeare.
Billy, sure.
Yeah.
Bill, yeah.
Big playwright, big poet,
Big
pretty famous, kind of like the Tom Clancy of his day.
Yeah.
Very
Big
well
deal.
known, very prolific, but also less known that he was a dad. He was a father of three, including, he had a son named Hamnet.
Not surprising. Not
Yeah.
surprising. Can't separate
Hamnet.
the work from the, Yeah.
Yeah.
Hamnet.
Hamnet sadly died at age 11, but they say that this had a really deep impact on William Shakespeare. He explored lots of parental relationships, a lot of father-son stuff, especially in like King Lear, for instance. And a lot of people say that it was that grief that kind of inspired him to create some of these iconic depictions of fatherly loss, fatherly love. So pretty focused on the themes of fatherhood, what it meant to be a dad. But he was away a lot. Shakespeare, he worked. Dad was creating, off writing plays, and he kind of left his family alone while he was building his literary empire. So a little bit of an absentee father.
Yeah. Yeah, busy guy. A busy guy. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Hard to say. Had his 11-year-old lived, maybe he would have spent more time at home. I guess they didn't have the mail back then, so how would you get your scripts out there? You gotta get on your horse.
He didn't have an agent.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably better off. You really want to watch the money yourself.
We would have had more comedies if his son had lived. Less tragedies.
Yeah. And we're probably better off because those comedies, those jokes have a timestamp.
Yeah, you don't think they hold up, huh?
Nah, they don't.
Well, that's nominee number one for the early modern era,
Yeah.
William Shakespeare. Moving on. 100 years later, there was a guy by the name of Benjamin Franklin. You may know him as a founding father of the United States, an inventor, a writer. But did you know he was a dad? Yes, he was the father to his loyalist son, William. And when I say loyalist, not loyal to him, loyal to the Britain monarchy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, Ben Franklin, he's kind of like America's dad, but he was also a dad, a biological dad. We see him as a founding father, literally. That's what we call him, a founding father. He taught us independence. He taught us to think critically. He taught us to stand up for our rights. He taught us about legacy.
Yeah.
But the truth is, Ben Franklin disowned his son over his loyalty to the British monarchy, and they never reconciled. Never. They just kind of went to their graves, never talking again. And kind of makes you think, like, Would you have rather Ben Franklin made up with his son or helped with the founding of America? I mean, just as a dad. Ollie, put your dad hat on.
I mean, there's got to be room for both. I don't know. That's a sad dad. That's a dad that makes me sad. I mean, you would think. I don't know. You know what though? Here's the thing. Like, a lot of it is sometimes we just can't control, or we have to let our kids grow up to be who they are, including those that were literally on what would end up becoming on the wrong side of history, just from a victor standpoint. You know what I mean? Like, they lost. He lost. You would think that someone would be like, you know what? We lost a war. You were right, Dad. You were right. But who knows what went on there? Very complex. That's a sad dad story. That's a sad dad story. I feel like that might be a theme for you here to make these choices challenging. What do we have for number 3, Neil?
Our third dad in the early modern era, guy by the name of Philip II of Spain. Don't know if you've ever heard of him. He had a pretty famous son. His son, Alexander the Great.
Whoa.
Have you ever heard about him?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Philip.
Wait, Alexander the Great? How is that possible? Isn't he from ancient Greece?
Hold on.
I think we're confusing things.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That's a different guy. We'll cut this part out. Okay, Philip II of Spain. He was a monarch. Yeah, that's right. He was a monarch who ruled Spain in the 16th century. I'm not AI, Sean Pressler. He micromanaged his son Don Carlos's life so severely it led to his imprisonment and madness, which I guess is a euphemistic way of saying mental breakdown. Yeah, Philip II kind of gives us the controlling royal father archetype. Some might say he was a great dad because he tried to prepare his son for a dangerous world, but a bad dad because, again, he got his son imprisoned. So,
Yeah.
Philip II.
Yeah. No, that one, that's an easy rank for third in my book, for sure.
Okay.
I think we pretty much have the order. Look, I mean, we talk about the old days. There's sickness, people died young. Childhood illnesses probably are a big deal. I think, look, with Shakespeare, like, sure, he was busy. Who knows? Maybe the passing of his son made him more absorbed into the work. But of these three, I will go with Shakespeare. And then maybe, who knows, like, in a weird way, like, his son's death probably, he found a way to acknowledge that grief, process it, and gave us some really great literature from it. So, I think he really made lemonade out of the lemons of his 11-year-old dying. That's my hot take. Shakespeare made lemonade. He is the best dad of the era.
Congratulations, Bill. You're the early modern era's world's greatest dad, William Shakespeare. Mazel tov.
Great lemonade, Bill.
Well, and now here's an exciting development, which is that now we've come to the modern era, which is the last couple hundred years.
Okay.
So we're going to have more familiarity, and because a lot of this era we've lived through, I mean, not a lot of it, but we're existing in this era. We've got 5 dads nominated. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll take you through the nominees, and then we'll dive into each. These are just in no order. The 5 nominees for world's greatest dad of the modern era are, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Charles Darwin.
Okay. Yeah.
Fred Rogers.
Wow. All right.
Barack Obama.
Okay.
Carl Sagan. And Prince Harry.
Prince Harry.
Now, before you decide, let's go into the pros and cons of each.
Okay.
Charles Darwin, a man who lived from 1809 to 1882. He was a naturalist, best known for the theory, still a theory, not proven, of evolution. That's right.
Okay.
Pretty big deal.
Yeah.
As a dad, he had 10 children.
Hmm.
He tended to raise them with scientific curiosity and affection. In many ways, he modeled scientific parenting, observations. He was engaged. He was tender. Um, he lost a daughter. He lost a daughter named Annie, and he had expressed his grief in many deeply human ways. Um, one negative is he kind of used his kids for data collection. He was observing, maybe, kind of putting them in his books, figuring out like how to incorporate his kids into his own work.
Kind of
Not
like
like
what
we
we
would
do.
do. Not like we would ever do on a fatherhood podcast.
Yeah. We are Charles Darwin of this era.
We've got theories. So
Yeah.
that's Darwin, you know him, you love him.
Yeah.
Theory of
Totally.
evolution.
Totally.
That's him.
You know,
One of the contenders for world's greatest dad of the modern era.
traveled a lot too. I mean, think about it. He went to the Galapagos back then. It's hard to get there now. I mean, the flights are
Yeah.
a very big
Where,
challenge. That I know
where do
for a
you think
fact.
he stayed in the Galapagos? Did he have like an Airbnb?
Look, that's a guy who's a camper. You know what I mean? He's tent, sleeping bag. He would probably, if he was around today, he would probably be most impressed. Not even, maybe the internet would be a close second, but probably an REI, because he's got to be able to relate to something. He clearly spent a lot of time out in the muck looking at the platypus, and, you know, you're going to need a waterproof sleeping bag, tent. It's probably
Sure.
raining, you need
That's
you
right.
need some good gear. So there you go. Big
Yeah.
REI fan, in my opinion, my estimation of the man.
Well, moving on from Darwin to you know him as Mister, but we're going to call him Fred. Fred Rogers, best
Legend.
known for the hit show on what used to be called Public Broadcasting Station, that is currently being defunded. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And, a lot of people don't know because he was like a dad to all of us. He was also
Yeah.
a biological father to two sons. Yeah. And he,
Anna
Mr.
Marine.
Rogers, Fred Rogers, he revolutionized what the archetype for an emotional, connected, communicative father could even be. Taught us all about our feelings. And, he spoke directly to children with respect, with empathy, kindness, with patience. The only knock on Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers as a dad, is he might have set the bar a little bit too high. What do you do? You're Fred Rogers' kid. Can you ever live up? It's like being Colin Hanks. Where do you go from here?
Exactly. Who was Fred Rogers' sons? But yeah, I mean
We
that'd
don't
be
know because
we
they'll
don't
never live up to Fred Rogers. That's
we
that's
don't
the
know.
problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. That's a thing. That is a thing. That is a thing. What kind of world do you leave for him? Sure, it might be a more kinder, gentler place. But
But at what cost? If your children can't surpass you,
yeah.
did you do it right?
Yeah, it's the catch-22 of picking the accomplished dad over the accomplished son, and then rating those dads. So that's, there might be just some flaw in our formula too. Mike, Charles Darwin, we may have to go back to the drawing board.
Right.
Maybe look at our own natural selection. You know, select better. I mean, Fred Rogers is Fred Rogers. And we have no information on his kids, what they did do.
I mean, I could look it up.
Yeah, that's all right.
I didn't look into that. Sorry.
That's yeah, it's all conjecture because they didn't come up with their own neighborhood of make believe. Well, I guess they had to. They didn't need to because Fred Rogers left the world a better place. I know who my odds-on favorite is. Who's next? I don't know anything about Carl Sagan. Really don't.
Oh well, we're not up to Carl yet. It's Mr. Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States. You know him. You love him. He's the reason we have health insurance.
Literally.
He's got a couple kids. Sasha,
Mm-hmm.
Malia.
Mm-hmm.
We watched them grow up before our eyes. And he kept the family dinner sacred. He made sure to kind of he lived above the store. He worked downstairs, and then he'd
Mm-hmm.
come up for dinner, or vice versa. I don't know the layout of the White House, but yeah, it was very important to him to have dinner with his kids. To many, they think that Barack Obama redefined fatherhood in the public eye for certainly for black fathers in America. He championed lots of quote responsible fatherhood initiatives, and he made sure that parenting was a part of the narrative. He kind of made being a dad look cool. Probably responsible for a lot of uh, my own fatherly impulses.
Oh wow!
Style and
So
such
this
and
hits
such. But
home
I'm
for
not voting,
you.
Ollie. This is you. This is your. I'm not trying to sway the judges here. So the only thing people might say is maybe he was away a lot. I saw him in an interview recently saying there was a year and a half like he was barely
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
Is it worth it? Is it worth it? To achieve political national greatness, to actually to miss some school plays, to miss some games, miss
yeah.
some birthdays. I don't know. It's a tough one. Is he disqualified from being the world's greatest dad because he had to go campaign?
If there's one ding on him, and it also speaks to just how we perceive him, because he has the gift of being who he is, and his legacy was created in the modern era of modern communication. So, he essentially comes off as like rather spotless, to the point where I think that's where people can kind of come up with their conspiracy theories. Like, he's not an American citizen. I mean, there's no way this guy could come off like this sharp, this whatever, which also speaks to the hurdles some people have to jump versus others to make it or to create any kind of notoriety, let alone being president of the United States. But I do have one legitimate ding on him. He's a smoker. He likes to smoke the cigarette. I don't think he's quit, but I don't know if he has or not. It's an amazing thing because obviously there's the random picture of him, and as someone who did smoke, who struggled to even tell my son that I once did, quit in 2009. Yeah, that's yeah, it's like for everything that guy's done, I feel like that could be the one accomplishment that's probably so important for any dad, which is, you know, give up the habit that essentially creates so many health problems. Look, we all have our flaws, but something I've discovered lately in this stage of my life that health truly is wealth. So if we're looking for anything, we gotta find something. That could be the one thing that holds him back for me. Yeah. It's just like, I mean, you gave us health care, and yet, I'm not afraid to take on the tobacco lobby. It's I'm here to do that, and yeah, it's just nothing really good comes out of that one. There is no moderation in tobacco consumption that I can condone. So there you go. That's my big ding. That's the car looks perfect, but it's like you get, like a beautiful brand new Aston Martin in that James Bond silver, and there's just that one visible nick. Like, it's like you're almost there, but you're not. It's, we got to knock 25 grand off the sticker price because of that.
Okay, moving on to Carl Sagan.
Mm,
Uh, he Carl Sagan had 5 children from 3 different marriages. So busy guy,
yeah.
astronomer, astrophysicist, science educator. It might not surprise you to learn that in his third marriage, he became a little bit more grounded, a little bit more family oriented, and his daughter Sasha Sagan, she found him to be quite sweet, awe-inspiring. Made her. She said he made being alive feel like a miracle without invoking the supernatural. And all accounts, he blended wonder with fatherhood, made us, really curious about the world. But some of his earlier kids from his previous marriages would sometimes describe him as emotionally distant. So, this is an interesting one because are you still the world's greatest dad if, you were a kind of a different father to different children that you fathered? Tough one.
Sometimes the dog barks when I'm presented with so much stuff here. Yeah, I mean, this is tricky. I'm gonna have to shed my own personal bias here, and it's a bias. It's something that I have to admit I just don't look at in the same way. My parents stayed together, and in some ways they were a candid they were candidates for perhaps not. I don't know. That's a bigger, difficult thing to unpack. But it is funny. Like I have friends obviously who are divorced. It happens. Whatever. You want people to be happy. There's a lot of life to live. Move on. It's always just so tricky. Like I'm not trying to say I'm an advocate for someone just to stay together for misery. You know what I mean? But it is interesting. It's a whole other way of being a dad when have kids with different partners. And I guess I just have a tough time kind of understanding or processing what that's like. And it's not so much a lack of empathy, but just, a whole other set of challenges that I just truly am not aware of. So it's tricky. Like, what? I this is an opportunity, Neil, in all seriousness, because being world's greatest dad is about taking on stuff. But it'd be really interesting to talk to some dads who are divorced dads, who are dads with kids from different partners and stuff like that. Because it is. I mean, look, it's the nuclear family, of course, is a myth. There's so many different ways it can work, and so that's a tough one for me to really appreciate and understand the nuances of that, because it's foreign to me based on just how yeah, I mean, that's a whole thing. Like, were you ever close or tight with friends who, their parents were split and then maybe they got remarried or they had stepkids? Like, I just don't really I've never dove into what that perspective's like. So I'm a little kind of uneducated on the subject, to be honest.
Okay. Well, it's good to know what you don't know. So we'll bake that into the when you make your final assessment of
Hmm.
world's greatest dad of the modern era.
Yeah.
Last one, not an American, but currently on our soil. Actually, he might be an American citizen now. Prince Harry.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why are we talking about Prince Harry? Well, he's kind of like also the embodiment of a modern dad, right? And he's got issues with his own dad. They're currently estranged, as far as we know.
Right.
He very famously publicly left the royal family to
Hmm.
protect his kids, right?
Hmm.
There was all this paparazzi following him and, endangering him and his wife and his kids. And he was like, this is not worth it. So they left. They went to LA. They're hanging out with Tyler Perry and Oprah and, everybody else. You could make the case, wow, Prince Harry is kind of like the consummate great dad. He literally gave up being a
Mm.
prince to protect his kids.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Uh-oh.
is he kind of like just making it, bringing too much drama into his kids' lives, by making this a thing at all? I mean, they've got that big deal at Netflix. They're very much public figures still. I mean, would it be better to just retreat and say, "Hey, we have enough money. We're just going to kind of live a quiet life and just chill, and keep the. I don't know. It's not really for me to say, but it is for me to say a little bit because he is in contention to be world's greatest dad of the modern era for this made up award that we're giving out this
Yeah.
Father's Day 2025. So I want to hear your thoughts, and then we'll give a final assessment.
He is a fascinating person to consider, okay? Like, first of all, we can't choose who we're born to. Okay, so part of you can be like, oh yeah, well, he grew up with quote everything, like certainly with plenty of means, education. One strike I could use against him. He did dress up like a Nazi for a party. One strike for him, or for him. He volunteered to go fight the Taliban in Afghanistan. He was in there. So I call me crazy, but that almost negates each other. Like that's real. That's real. If they found him, there would be a video of him being beheaded. So that's significant. I think everything you were saying is incredibly truthful, and at some point, especially when you are coming from a family with a certain any when you come from when you're raised in a certain way, culturally, religion, whatever. And then there's you, and you have to walk your own path. And then you have your own family, and standing up for that and recognizing that, I think is actually very relatable. What's hilarious to me is we're using Prince Harry as someone who's relatable. What's funny about Barack Obama is that, he comes from obviously a far more humble background, but the way you appreciate him, or how I appreciate him, is just so spotlessly clean. So it's very hard for me to kind of relate to Barack Obama. Like the guy's just, you're like, what? How do you? I mean, he's like Michael Jordan on the court in 1993 or 1996. You're just like, kind of like, at that level. I'm a big Barack Obama fan. It's funny, like, Mr. Rogers initially was like, oh, this guy's a no-brainer, but, there's to a degree stuff we don't know, and this is crazy to say, but I think I'm going to go with Prince Harry, because in this modern era, it's all been out there. You know what I mean? His mistakes, right? He did lose his mom when he was young. I mean, he's a fascinating person to consider in this light, because he is not someone who's had it all, but he's had a lot, and yeah, he's chosen to walk the path he's walking. Full disclosure, I've never really seen Suits, so I don't really know what to say about Meghan Markle.
I don't think we need to say anything. I
You're
think
right.
this is a podcast about dads and fatherhood.
I felt like I had to at least acknowledge that I've never
Yeah.
actually seen.
Well, my daughter does
Suits.
love that show.
I mean, it's a heck of a show. And I'll tell you, because this is something we can do on World's Greatest Dad, is because we are also Hollywood insiders. Great little story. Patrick Adams, I actually, he had gone to USC well after I had finished, but there was just enough overlap where I had seen him act in a play, and so I had met him a little bit, and really amazing when he landed Suits recently. Before he got Suits, he was on a pilot, and he was fired from set. And he wasn't fired for behavior. They were like, we cast the wrong guy. Which happens. Happened to Harvey Keitel for Apocalypse Now. They're like, it's not working. Sorry.
Eric Stoltz,
Where'd he get canned from?
Back to the Future.
Ooh. Stoltz, baby. Right? So, he was down. I remember talking to someone, and she was like, he is devastated. And then he got Suits. And I just think that's a pretty amazing thing. Just when you think you hit that rock bottom, you never know that next opportunity is there. And that's what's really about. Being a dad is about knowing that your Hollywood break is right around the corner, even if you were fired on set. And that is pretty much, can't really sum things up better than that for me.
Happy Father's Day, Ollie.
Happy Father's Day to you, Neil. I hope you enjoy your nap in a hammock, and you think about the fact that where you're maybe falling asleep, was where some soldier boy many years ago wondered if he would ever see the shores of America again before he went off to go fight, some war, some foreign land.
Wow, you get really militaristic there.
You were the one who is spending time at Governor's Island. I'm going to a brewery. Actually, no, I'm going to be in Japan.
Must be nice.
Well,
Must be nice.
someone's got to do it.